I'm Michael Sullivan, 45 years old, living in Seattle's South Lake Union, just a few blocks from downtown. Every morning, I brew a strong black coffee, listen to the financial news on the radio, and walk to the office of Pacific Ventures, the fintech company I co-founded over a decade ago. My job isn't easy to explain, especially to those who think office work is just data entry all day. I manage multi-million-dollar investment projects, from negotiating with major venture funds to handling last-minute financial crises. But to Lauren, my wife, I'm just a guy doing something in tech, not worth bragging about to her friends. My apartment is compact, on a high floor, overlooking Seattle's streets, where colorful umbrellas glide by under the city's familiar drizzle. I cherish the morning quiet, when pale light filters through white curtains, the scent of coffee lingers, and I get a few minutes to breathe before diving into the workday grind. Pacific Ventures is the passion project of me and 3 college friends. But I never go into details with Lauren. She doesn't ask, and I don't want to boast. I used to think that if I worked quietly and provided enough, she'd be proud. But no, in her eyes, I'm always the unremarkable husband.
Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the latest video.
Jessica, 43, is Lauren's best friend, someone she idolizes. She's beautiful, charming, and always knows how to stand out. At parties, Jessica is the center of attention, showered with compliments. Jessica, that dress is stunning. Or Jessica, your new boyfriend's a CFO, so impressive. Lauren never understood what I do. Maybe she never cared to. I've stayed up until 2 a.m. handling crises for a $3 million investment project, or sat with my college friends to build Pacific Ventures from a napkin idea into a company worth tens of millions. But Lauren doesn't know. When friends ask about our marriage, I give a faint smile and say, we haven't talked much lately. It's no big deal, not because I'm hiding anything, but because there's nothing left to say. For 2 years, Lauren and I have been like strangers, meeting only over the bills I pay and silent dinners. I used to believe marriage was a place you could always return to, a place where you're accepted despite your flaws. But one day, that belief shattered. Over the past 2 years, I've quietly covered most of our living expenses. The mortgage for our house in Seattle's suburbs, electricity, water, internet, cable, even the luxury vacations Lauren loves, all came from my account. At parties, Lauren and Jessica talk about Jessica's new boyfriend, Ethan Brooks, a successful CFO. Ethan just bought a condo downtown. Lauren says, her voice full of admiration, he really knows how to make things special. I stand in the corner, holding a glass of wine, their words hitting like small daggers. I don't argue, don't explain. I thought that if I kept working quietly, kept providing, one day Lauren would look at me differently. But she doesn't. I'm always the odd one out in her perfect picture. A husband not classy enough to show off to friends. I just closed a successful funding round with a major venture fund in San Francisco. It was a big win for Pacific Ventures. Enough for me to breathe a sigh of relief and plan a few days off. I wanted to use that time to help Lauren prepare for her birthday, like I always do. Nothing fancy, just booking her favorite restaurant, picking out a cake, and being there for her special day. I'm used to quietly ensuring everything goes smoothly, from checking bills to arranging the small details Lauren never bothers with. I called her from the office, my voice gentle. Lauren, I'm planning to come back early for your birthday. Let me know if there's anything you need me to book or prepare. I still remember her voice over the phone, not angry, but cold, with a strange hint of hesitation. A brief pause, then she cleared her throat. Michael, if possible, don't come this year. I froze, thinking maybe she was worried I was too busy with work. It's okay, I've already cleared my schedule. I really want to be there, I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. But this time, her tone was firm. Jessica's bringing Ethan. He's a CFO, very successful, a great talker. Your job? It's hard to explain. You showing up would just invite comparisons and make things awkward. I gripped the phone, my fingers clenching so hard my knuckles turned white. Are you saying I'd embarrass you? I asked, my voice trembling through gritted teeth. Lauren didn't back down. Instead, she went on, her voice even, as if she'd thought it through. If you insist on coming, don't expect me to save face for you. Then she hung up. No hesitation, no further explanation. The office fell eerily silent. The coffee on my desk had gone cold. I stared into the void, as if the world had cracked open with a single sentence. I sat there, in the familiar armchair by the window, Seattle's dim light filtering through, but it couldn't dispel the chill spreading in my chest. Lauren's words echoed in my head. I used to think that, even if I wasn't the classy husband in her eyes, I was still her husband, still part of her life. But now, I realized I wasn't. I stood up, walked slowly to my desk, and opened my laptop. The screen lit up, its blue glow reflecting on my face in the quiet apartment. Without hesitation, I logged into my banking app. For 2 years, I'd been quietly transferring money to cover the mortgage for our house in Seattle's suburbs. Electricity, water, internet, cable, and miscellaneous expenses whenever Lauren said she needed cash. Fixing the washer, replacing tires, or helping Jessica when she was going through a rough patch. Nearly $20,000, not counting the times, Lauren said. The dryer's broken, or Jessica needs a little help to get by. Can you manage? I always sent the money, no questions, no complaints, as if it were an unspoken contract I was bound to. I opened the transaction history, and the number appeared, $20,346. My heart sank, not because I regretted the money, but because the harsh truth hit me. Even after everything I'd done, I was still not enough in Lauren's eyes. I scrolled through the entries, $234 for electricity, $152 for water, $275 for internet and cable, month after month, like I was her invisible accountant, unseen, unacknowledged, unthanked. I remembered the last time Lauren called, a few months ago, at midnight. Michael, the water heater's broken. Can you call someone? Jessica's on vacation with Ethan. You're the only one left. It seemed harmless then, but now it felt like a bitter truth. I wasn't loved as a husband. I was just the fixer when the people she truly admired weren't around. I moved the cursor to the auto payment section. Electricity bill, click, payment canceled successfully. Water bill, click, payment canceled successfully. Internet and cable, click. Another notification. No alarms, no warnings, just silence. Silence, like how I'd always existed in Lauren's life. I closed the laptop, but the screen lingered in my mind. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel triumphant. Just an odd emptiness, as if I'd let go of a burden I'd carried too long. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was angry, but because I kept replaying how it all unfolded. Lauren's words. How she was willing to cut me out of her own birthday just to impress her friends. I'd been compared my whole life, from Lauren praising Jessica's ex-boyfriends, to the successful men at her parties. But this was the first time I was outright rejected, as if my existence was an inconvenience. I sat on the balcony, looking out at Seattle's streets, where hazy lights reflected on the wet pavement. I wondered, what did I do to deserve this? I tried to be a good husband, reliable, but in return, I got silence and shrugs. Lauren wanted everything perfect to show off to her friends. I wondered, if I stopped paying the bills, if I stopped being the one keeping things running behind the scenes, would she see my worth? But then I realized that question didn't matter anymore. I was tired of proving myself to someone who never truly saw me. Lauren's birthday came quickly. I didn't call. I didn't send a card. I didn't post anything online. Not out of spite, but because I couldn't pretend anymore. I was exhausted from playing the quiet husband, always in the background, keeping everything running smoothly. Around 5 p.m., I sat on my balcony in South Lake Union, sipping ginger tea, watching Seattle's streets shimmer under hazy lights and light rain. My phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Lauren's name. I stared at it for a few seconds, then let it go dark. Right after, a text popped up. Michael, why's the power out? Can you check on it? Today's really important. I set my tea down, opened the text, but didn't reply. Another message came through, this time from Lauren. There's no water either, and the internet's down. Call the providers now. I'm freaking out. I sat still, eyes fixed on the rain-soaked Seattle streets. No anger, no pain, just an odd calm. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" Not a word about last week's call, when she banned me from her own birthday, saying I'd embarrass her. She just wanted me to do what I always did, fix her mess. Then a text from Jessica Coleman arrived. Michael, seriously, the internet's gone. Guests are arriving. Lauren's about to cry. What's going on? I picked up the phone, read the message, and set it back down. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes, letting the sound of Seattle's rain fill the space. They didn't care about me, only what I could do for them. Lauren, Jessica, and all those party guests, they wanted me to solve the problem, like I was some invisible logistics guy. But this time I chose silence. About an hour later, the phone buzzed again. This time it was a video call from Evelyn Parker, Lauren's aunt, the only one in her family, who occasionally texted to check on me. Though I rarely responded, I hesitated, then accepted. The screen showed Lauren's kitchen, pitch black, lit only by a phone's flashlight. Evelyn looked tired, her eyes slightly red. Michael, she said softly, her voice low. Lauren's in a panic. The house is dark. People are running around. No one knows what to do. I said nothing, just looked at her through the screen. Evelyn paused, then continued, neither blaming nor defending. What happened? You've never missed Lauren's birthday. I know you have a reason, so say something. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice steady. Lauren said I'd embarrass her. She told me if I insisted on coming, not to expect her to save face. What do you think I should do after that? Evelyn froze. Her face shifted in that moment. In the background, I heard Lauren's voice. Loud. He's probably just sulking. No one's cruel enough to do this. Then another voice, sharper. Jessica, Ethan's almost here. Someone called the power company, but I don't believe Michael would do this today. The video call with Evelyn Parker was still going, the phone's flashlight casting light on the dark kitchen of Lauren's house in Seattle's suburbs. The clamor of guests echoed in the background, mixed with Lauren's voice, trying to stay composed. Has anyone called the power company yet? How is this happening? Suddenly, the screen shifted. A new face appeared in the frame. Ethan Brooks, in a sharp suit, hair neatly combed, with the confident demeanor Lauren had endlessly praised. He looked at me through the screen, eyes narrowing, then blurted out, almost instinctively, Michael, Mr. Sullivan. Every sound in the kitchen stopped. I saw Lauren behind Ethan, mouth agape, face pale. Jessica, next to her, froze, gripping her phone tightly. No one spoke. Ethan turned to the group, his voice clear, trembling slightly from shock. This is Michael Sullivan, my boss at Pacific Ventures. The one who approved my transfer to Seattle. Silence. A heavy silence, as if the room had been drained of air. Lauren stared at the screen, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe her ears. Jessica stepped back, hand over her mouth, face flushed. The guests, Lauren's friends, who'd heard her say I was just some guy, doing something in tech, stood still, eyes darting, trying to process what had just happened. I stayed calm, gave a faint smile, and said evenly, "Welcome to Pacific Ventures, Ethan. I'm looking forward to seeing your financial plan for this quarter." Then I pressed the button to end the call. The phone screen went black. My apartment fell silent again, with only the patter of rain on the balcony. I leaned back in my chair, not happy, not sad, just feeling an odd relief, as if the wheel of life had finally turned the right way. The truth had spoken for itself, without me saying a word. Lauren, Jessica, and all those guests, they never knew I co-founded Pacific Ventures. They never asked what I did, only heard Lauren call me a dull guy, not classy enough to show off. And now, in a single moment, every mask had fallen. I remembered meeting Ethan a few months ago, at a financial conference in San Francisco. He shook my hand, called me Mr. Sullivan, and talked about prospects with Pacific Ventures. I didn't know he was Jessica's boyfriend, the one Lauren always admired. Lauren never shared details about Ethan, beyond him being successful, and a great talker. I never cared enough to ask more. But now, I knew one thing. Ethan would report directly to me, and Lauren, who banned me from her birthday to avoid embarrassment, was now standing in that dark kitchen, facing a truth she hadn't expected. I opened my laptop, checked my work emails. One subject line stood out: transfer confirmation, Ethan Brooks, from San Francisco branch to Seattle HQ. I opened the attachment, scanned the list. There it was, Ethan Brooks, head of finance, transferring to Seattle, approved by Michael Sullivan, co-founder. I let out a soft chuckle, just a reflex. The world is smaller than I thought, and I knew what was coming had only just begun. I looked out the window, Seattle's streetlights reflecting on the wet pavement. I didn't need to do anything more. The truth had spoken, and I just had to sit here, letting things unfold as they were meant to. After ending the video call with Evelyn, I set the phone down on the table. Its screen dark. Outside, Seattle's streetlights reflected on the rain-soaked pavement, casting hazy streaks of light. My apartment was quiet. No texts, no calls, just the faint sound of drizzle. But the silence didn't last. Half an hour later, the phone buzzed. A long text from Lauren appeared. "Michael, do you know how important today was? I cried all night." Ethan didn't know how to react. "You think this was clever?" I read it but didn't open it right away. I brewed a cup of ginger tea, sat on the sofa, letting the warmth of the cup ease the tension in my throat. I didn't feel joy, but I didn't feel guilt either. I just felt an odd clarity. Lauren didn't apologize, didn't mention banning me from her birthday, calling me an embarrassment. She just wanted to blame me, as if I'd ruined everything. Then a text from Jessica Coleman came. "Michael, you did this on purpose, didn't you? You let it happen right in the middle of the party. I didn't think you could be so selfish." I looked at the message, feeling empty. My whole life, I'd never been selfish. I paid the bills, fixed the problems, kept Lauren's and even Jessica's lives running smoothly. But now, when I stopped, they called me selfish. I opened Lauren's text, typed a few lines. "You say I'm selfish." I stayed home. I didn't start the video call. I didn't call myself Ethan's boss. I did nothing. If a single truth was enough to ruin the party, maybe that party wasn't built on anything solid. I hit send, not waiting for a reply. I didn't need them to understand, because I knew, no matter what I said, they'd only hear what suited them. Half an hour later, another text from Lauren arrived. "Brief, I didn't expect you to choose this way to get back at me. So disappointing." I closed my eyes, leaned back in my chair. Get back at her? She thought this was revenge. That night, an email from Ethan landed in my work inbox. I opened it, reading slowly. "Michael, I'm sorry for not realizing sooner. I have immense respect for you, for your work, and for how you stayed silent today. I've never felt more ashamed, but not because of you. I've ended things with Jessica. I can't stay with someone who disrespects others like that." I read the email twice, then typed a reply. "Ethan, you don't need to apologize. We're each responsible for how we see others. Don't worry, I don't bring personal matters into work, but I hope you understand. Sometimes silence is the greatest strength." I hit send, closed the screen, and set the phone down. I stood up, stepped onto the balcony, letting Seattle's cool breeze hit my face. I thought about Lauren, how she'd tried to craft a perfect picture for her birthday party. But in the end, Ethan, the one she admired, called me his boss in front of everyone. I pictured the scene like a replay. Lauren, flustered, nearly dropping the cake tray. Jessica, frozen, face pale, and the guests there just to eat and judge, sitting in shocked silence. Evelyn, the only one who reached out, probably saw me differently now, not with curiosity, but with respect. I didn't feel smug. I just felt a sense of rightness, as if for the first time, someone outside finally saw what I'd endured for years. The things Lauren called overly sensitive or cold when I chose silence. I went back inside, playing an old song, the kind of sound that once made me feel invisible in the early days of starting my business. But tonight, that melody felt like an affirmation. I had stepped out of the shadows, not by shouting, but by standing firm. A week after the chaos at Lauren's birthday party, my life returned to its familiar rhythm, brewing coffee in the morning, walking to the Pacific Ventures office, and diving into meetings with investors. But inside, I felt a shift. I no longer checked my phone to see if Lauren had texted, no longer worried about whether her house bills were paid on time. I had stopped, and for the first time in years, I felt relieved. Then one afternoon, as I was resting in my South Lake Union apartment, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before peering through the peephole. Lauren stood there, next to her mother, Helen. Lauren clutched a small bag, her face weary. Helen had her arms crossed, her gaze stern but lacking the rigidity I'd seen in past encounters. I stood still for a few seconds, letting my mind catch up with the sight, then opened the door without a word. "Hi." Lauren spoke first, her voice hoarse, as if she just endured a long journey. "Can we come in and talk for a bit?" I silently stepped aside, making way. No hugs, no warm greetings, just a heavy silence, stretching from the hallway into the living room. I poured 2 glasses of water, set them on the table, and sat across from them. Lauren glanced around the apartment, simple, tidy, with no gifts or traces of her. Helen spoke first. "What about Lauren's birthday? She said some things she shouldn't have. Maybe we were a bit harsh on you." I stayed quiet, nodding slightly, waiting to see where they were headed. I was used to their pattern of starting with soft words before getting to the point. As expected, Lauren spoke up right after, a bit hesitant. "We've thought it over. Actually, we have a proposal." She placed her bag on the table, pulling out a printed sheet. "You're doing well, with a good job. We were hoping you could help with a monthly contribution, about $2,000, just enough to cover living expenses, insurance, and savings for Mom." I looked at her, then at the paper. $2,000 a month? Helen jumped in, as if worried I'd misunderstand. "It's not much, given your position. We're family, Michael." I let out a soft chuckle, not out of bitterness, but because it all felt so familiar. Jessica was always the one who couldn't be pressured, while I was always the one expected to handle it. I looked them straight in the eye. "If she contributes $1,000 a month, I'll consider it. And I want a clear contract, stating that if I keep helping, the house will be mine when both sides are gone." Silence enveloped the room. Helen's face darkened, her eyes flashing with anger. "Are you seriously putting conditions on your own family?" she asked, her voice rising. I didn't blink. "Not conditions, but principles. I've spent nearly $20,000 over 2 years, and no one asked if I was okay. If you want me to continue, everything has to be clear." Lauren glanced at her mother, her voice starting to tremble. "Maybe we should discuss this again." But Helen stood up abruptly, slamming her hand on the table, making the 2 water glasses shake. "We've treated you like a son in this house for years, and now we ask for a little help, and you demand a contract. Unbelievable." I stayed seated, looking straight at her. "If you and Lauren saw me as family, why did no one ask if I was tired from paying the bills? If marriage is an investment needing returns, we can tally every cent, but I'm not paying for it with silence anymore." Helen opened her mouth to say something, but her lips pressed shut, no words coming out. Lauren gently tugged her mother's arm, her voice soft. "Come on, Mom, let's go." I stood up, walked them to the door. No hugs, no goodbyes. When the door closed, only the sound of the wind from the balcony swept in, carrying Seattle's chill. I stood there, feeling another chapter close, and this time, I was the one who wrote the final line. After the day Lauren and her mother left my apartment, they didn't reach out again. No calls, no texts, no apologies, no accusations. As if all their life's disappointments were caused by me, the difficult husband. But I wasn't surprised. I was used to that kind of silence, not from remorse or shame, but from people who didn't know what to say when they could no longer control me. I kept living. Meetings stretched into the evening. Investment contracts I was once doubted for just because I was a quiet man. But now, I no longer felt guilty. I no longer thought I was wrong for refusing to be a backup wallet, the fixer of every problem, just because I could handle it. I learned that love isn't measured by monthly bills, isn't forced by obligation. If affection only exists when I pay, that's not family. That's a transaction. I started cutting the invisible strings that once tied me to the role Lauren assigned me. I changed my phone's wallpaper, no longer keeping our wedding photo. I didn't remember her birthday, didn't send gifts to her family. I learned to put a period on guilt-ridden texts, instead of waiting for an apology that would never come. One afternoon, I stopped at a familiar Seattle coffee shop, where a wooden sign hung with the words, "Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I sat there, sipping a hot latte, thinking about the path I'd walked. There was a time I believed that if I was quiet, devoted, and dutiful, Lauren would accept me. But the truth is, if you let others get used to disrespecting you, they'll see your sacrifices as obligations, and your silence as agreement. I chose to stand up, not to fight Lauren, but to protect myself. I chose to set boundaries, not out of selfishness, but because I understood my worth isn't defined by others' pity or fleeting needs. If someone asked, "Michael, do you regret not helping Lauren when she needed it?" I'd answer, "I regret that it took me so long to realize I deserved better." Because real family is where you're seen as a whole person, not a wallet, not a backup, not a last resort for those who always put you last. In society, refusing family obligations is often seen as ungrateful. But try standing in my shoes. The husband excluded from his wife's birthday for not being classy enough. The one who paid tens of thousands of dollars in silence without being asked. Are you okay? I didn't choose family in the traditional sense. I chose myself. The story of Michael Sullivan, and my wife banned me from her birthday. Then her friend's boyfriend looked at me and said hi. Bosses reflects the common social pressures and expectations in modern American life, especially in family relationships and middle-class culture. Michael, a 45-year-old Seattle man, quietly paid nearly $20,000 for his wife Lauren's bills and expenses, only to be dismissed and even banned from her birthday, for fear he'd embarrass her in front of friends. The pivotal moment, when Ethan recognized Michael as his boss at Pacific Ventures, and Michael's firm stance in demanding a clear contract with Lauren and her mother, highlight a key lesson: setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's a way to protect self-respect in a society that values appearances and financial pressures. In today's America, where hustle culture and the expectation to keep up appearances often push people to sacrifice themselves to please others, Michael's story is a reminder that personal worth shouldn't be defined by acceptance from loved ones. Michael's cancellation of bill payments and refusal to provide financial support without fairness reflect the need to establish boundaries in relationships, especially when faced with prolonged disrespect. The lesson here is to listen to your own emotions and dare to say no when being taken advantage of, as Michael did when confronted with Lauren's $2,000 a month request. Modern Americans can apply this by prioritizing mental health, communicating expectations clearly, and building relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided obligations. Michael's open-ended question at the end, whether he was too cold or right to protect himself, encourages us to reflect on balancing family duties with self-love, a very real issue in American society today. Subscribe to our channel to follow inspiring stories about self-respect and rediscovery, like Michael's. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with even deeper lessons.